Good day, folks. This is Dr. Terry and Tom from the Metaphysical Mysteries, the most interesting part of your day. And today we're going international, and we have Julien Delumeau. Is that about right? Did I get it good?
That's correct. Thanks, Tom.
Long time since high school French. So just saying. So Julien, I've known Julien for a long time, and Julien is from France. Years ago, we went to some schools together, and now he's kind of moved into a different area. And for those of you from France, we're going to, that may be watching, or different European countries, we will be speaking slowly today, so we can hopefully allow you to interpret within your mind. And Julien's going to do the same for our places here in America that might need to be a little more in tune with our accents that we all have. So that's where we're at. So, hey, Julien, you're a biological engineer, have been for like 14 years. And you used to live in Minnesota here in the States. So you are, very familiar with how the United States works and so forth. I will let you give a little background first, and then I'm going to ask you some questions a little bit about, how the whole intuitive thing happens in Europe and France in particular. But you have got an interesting background with your training in some shamanic areas, as well as many others we'll talk about. So I'm going to turn it over to you and let you give kind of a self-introduction to everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Terry and Tom, for inviting me to this podcast today. So my name is Julien Delumeau, and I'm 39 years old. As Terry mentioned, I have a degree in biomedical engineering, and I've been working in that field for the past 14 years. And interestingly, mainly in the heart area. So medical devices to repair the heart. So, something linked to love already. And I was pretty intuitive already as a kid. I was able to read people pretty quickly, to feel others' emotions, but I couldn't, say what it was. And that kind of died out. And in 2010, I actually was in the desert in Jordan on a trekking, basically. And I felt something happened, something weird. And I came back home a week after, and I opened my eyes one morning, and there were spirits all over my room. So being in biological engineering, I felt I had been drugged the past night, thinking something was put in my drinks, and seeing all these spirits around. And once I changed to bottled water for a few days and it stayed, I said, well, either I'm crazy or it's real. And, so.
Now, let me ask you, I guess in most places we would call that an awakening. Is that what you would call it?
Yes, I think it was an awakening. At the time, I felt pretty empty. Like, I basically would wake up, go to work, come back, and I felt it wasn't the life I was dreaming of, and I wasn't feeling full inside of myself. And then that came, and I was like, oh, this is cool. I basically went to the supermarket. I could see people's auras, their angels, their organs, and I could see everything through them. I'm like, it's pretty interesting. So that was, I think, the third eye awakening indeed that happened. And luckily, there were some psychics around that could help me with this, because, when you wake up and you see all of that nonstop during the day, it's very scary.
Yes.
So after a couple of months, I went to see a psychic, and she basically was glad to have a psychic who is also an engineer. And she confirmed that, I basically said, well, how can I get rid of this? It's fun, but it's a bit weird. She said, well, you don't get rid of it. It's a gift.
That's true. That's true. I think everybody after that awakening kind of looks to someone to try to mentor them, through that. If it happens when you're a little kid, a little scary in a lot of cases, and mom and dad may not know what to tell you. They may have not experienced anything like that. You being much older, plus you're a world traveler. I left that out in your introduction. You've been everywhere and you speak many languages. I think was a little bit of about 8 languages. Isn't that correct? Something like that?
Yes, 8.
8. Yeah. Well, you're a better man than I am.
I'm still working on English.
It's easy.
We're still working.
You grew up speaking English, guys. It's easy for you.
So very good. Well, okay. So then, before we get into your story in particular, what is the background with, intuitives and things in France and Europe? I mean, how are they, looked upon, and we'll compare and contrast a little bit with the United States.
I think here in Europe, it's especially in France, we're a very medical and mind-centric country. So intuition was not seen really well, but we had Mr. Kardec in the 19th century who started to shake the system. So you can see and you can find quite a lot of intuitive writing circles in France, from Kardec teachings in the 19th century. And then from our experience, it's been more and more common to encounter this in about the past 20 years. So you first had groups started to work on, when you basically lose someone, on grieving. So basically, they would invite psychics, and people will bring pictures of their loved ones who passed away. And this is how it's fairly commonly introduced to folks in France. Like you have, I think about 100 grieving groups in France who do that, public channeling fairly regularly.
Sure.
So it's been mainly focused on that. And in some areas, by tradition, you have, those psychic healers, mainly Brittany, in some of those areas where, the grandmas would know the plants and also, basically treat the burns, that kind of stuff.
So like what we would call herbalists.
Yep.
Yeah, and Brittany, for the American folks that don't remember high school geography, is a section, province or whatever you'd like to call it, in basically northwestern France, correct?
Yes, and with Celtic roots, and I think the Celtic tradition, had that mind opening, and for France, the west is the coast, which is the more open area, and when you come where I live in the Alps, it's a little less open-minded. So.
Right. Yeah, you are in the Alps now, correct? Yes.
Correct.
Yeah, fantastic. So you like the Alps? Is that a good thing?
It's a good place for grounding for somebody like me.
I bet it is. So, okay, fantastic. I know there's in England there's spiritualism is a big thing, and spiritualist church and stuff like that. And I know Europe probably is not as it used to be, but I don't think it is anymore as churchy, I'll call it, for lack of a better term, as some parts of America are. Am I correct? Or
I think the church has lost a lot of followers, and that's why I think so many people feel lost, because spirituality was supposedly taught at church, but then people felt it was too dogmatic, and all the recent scandals as well didn't help much. So it depends. You still have some tradition there, but I think spirituality is taught a lot outside of churches now, especially in Europe. You're right.
Makes sense. Okay, well, let's get over. You say you're starting to talk to some new folks. You want to tell us how that came about and who you're talking to?
Mm-hmm. So my psychic abilities have been evolving over the past 10 years. So initially I would, receive messages from dead ones and from guides to help people evolve in their life when I had a blockade. And over the past few years, it's been more towards healing. So helping people, connect to their self-healing abilities. So I don't say I'm not healing anything. People, have the ability to connect to their own energy and to activate some circuits in the body. I think it's important people realize that.
Right.
And on that journey, one of my mentors, she's in Quebec. She's a Native American. And she called me one day, she couldn't feel both legs. Like she basically woke up and out of the blue, she couldn't walk. She couldn't stand on her legs, like they were gone. And when I connected with her energetic body, like basically there were no legs. Okay. So I'm like, okay, I'm
gonna stop you for a minute. For those folks who are listening to this and you say there's no legs, you're saying energetic body.
Energetic body, yep.
So would we call that the astral body or the etheric body or part of the aura, or what? How would you classify that? So
I think it's part of the aura. You would see basically the energy would stop by the hip area, and then there would be no energy in the physical legs area. You're right, and thanks for clarifying that.
So if we scientifically hooked her up to machines to see if there was a lack of energy flow, that would show. Is that correct?
That would correct. There would be no energy flow in that area.
And Tommy, with what you do, how would that appear to you? I mean, you do a lot of this kind of energy work. Have you ever had anything like that ever happen?
Not to that degree where someone's lost a limb. Usually you'll see that with phantom limb pain with amputees, right, where the energy's still there, even though the physical is no longer there. So just the opposite of what we're talking about here.
Right, right. So unusual situation. So, okay, you get connected with this lady from Quebec, and you're doing your thing. So tell us the story, how to come out.
Yep. So I usually do appointments, so it allows time for the energy to arrive and for both of us to connect from soul to soul level. And so we start looking at this, and then she tells me, you have new guides coming up. And she said, well, you have to, basically, she was the excuse for me to connect with them. And they were very different from the ones I've been working before. They were pretty high in terms of energy level. And they basically told me what to do. So I would listen to them. I would hear, I would be able to hear what they wanted to do. And they told me exactly what to do. So basically, I didn't do anything, just being present to them and guiding her through that.
Let's clarify for a minute for the folks that are listening and saying guides, is these real people? No, when I say real people, they're not in flesh. These are spirit people. Now, some people might call them, depending on where you grew up and what you're socially conditioned to believe, that those are angels. Mm-hmm. Some people would call them guides, and some people split those two into two different things. Do you split them into two different things, or do you consider them kind of all one, or how do you do that?
I think it depends. I think I would split them because I can sense on the way they behave. So for me, guides are people who have a connection with your soul, like they know you from somewhere. Right. Like they could be, loved ones who passed away from other family or other lives. And those usually are, I don't know, I sense they're friendly, but like you meet a friend, you sense comfortable, like it's family, Angels, you have some level of authority already, and it's a much higher vibration. It's usually very strong in terms of love. Mm-hmm. And usually I feel colder, because they come from higher realms. And that guy was, I think, at a different level, like teacher. So between angel and the guide, sometimes you feel teacher, and you also have the authority that you sense that they tell you to do it. You can't, not a friend, you can't laugh with them, they tell you what to do and you have to do it. So, yeah.
I know what you mean. Absolutely. There is a difference.
So, yeah.
Okay, go ahead. That's a cool story. Keep going.
Yeah, so, interestingly, he was a teacher with 4 students, and I think he was teaching them how to work with human psychics to do that kind of stuff. And I said, okay, what do we do? And they said, well, her legs she has some karmic issues. So if people believe in past lives, what they told me is that because of what's happening now on Earth, because of the change of energies, a lot of things we have not handled in the past may show up in our present life. And she was at that moment where she had to forgive or to heal some past life where she still had, issues not being solved. So that showed up in her legs, kind of not being present from the energy level. So basically, they brought her back to those 2 past lives, and she realized, she didn't know these. And when she accepted, and what happened, they brought back, so it was funny, kind of as if you have a big sock. So basically, over her physical legs, they put those 2 socks, and they kind of sutured them with the rest of her aura, so that basically the energy would come back to her body. And I hope it's clear.
Let me ask this question. You talk about past lives. So for the listeners, past lives are almost a given in most cultures around the world. United States is the only one where we get a raised eyebrow. So when Julien's speaking about that, I mean, he's speaking from, the culture that he lives in. It's pretty well known that that's a deal. Now, did you find out what actually happened to her? Did she lose legs in those lives? And if so, what method did she lose those legs by? I mean, did she get run over by a wagon and lose them, or did she get, what happened?
Yep. So it's a good question. So what happened is that I think one life was in the Maghreb area, so Morocco, Algeria, northwest of Africa, and she got the images and I got them as well at the same time. So there was basically a horse race or something like that. She was running away. It seems it was some kind of royal or prince succession, and she was basically on fighting with others, and they basically pushed her off her horse, and that's how she broke a leg and she died in the desert alone. They basically wanted her to die alone so she wouldn't be able to get whatever inheritance it was. So physically at that time, I think she was very angry when she died, and I think that's why the leg, somehow part of the leg energy stayed there. Okay. The other one wasn't as clear as that one, but she might have received like a sort of, the leg was cut as well. So the left and the right, basically before the session, she wasn't able to move her legs. She wasn't able to fold her knees at all. So the legs were like straight, without any sensations.
No wonder I said run over by a wagon. It's almost like I got a little bit of psychic ability, just a little.
Indeed.
So now, Tommy, let me ask you this. If you came across somebody who had one of these things, how would you treat that using the techniques that you use?
I would just try to get those energy fields to open up from what's there. It's interesting because she lost the momentum, or the motion rather, but physiologically, was she still getting circulation through her legs and everything else? So it's one part of the physiology that was disrupted, not the whole thing. So we just have to try to balance that out and reactivate it.
So regular allopathic medicine, your doctors, if you will, they would just call this a psychosomatic type thing and write it off to that?
Quite often, yes.
Yeah.
Or an unknown, sorry, we can't help you kind of scenario.
Yeah, there's a lot of those out there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is that what they do in France as well? With the doctor?
Yes, that's what they would say. And I think that's why she called me, because she knew that, medically speaking, they would say, sorry, we can't help.
Right. Exactly. Do either of you think that a psychologist or psychiatrist would have been able to assist somebody in this, or is this too far off their given path to do that?
I think it depends. I mean, the vast majority may have said she's crazy or she's delusional or whatever, and given her a pill to relax, and that's it. But there's still some people who are open to energy. So, it depends who she would have gone to.
Yeah. And Tommy, you agree with that?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, just by training, and this is a little stereotypical, but psychiatrists focus on meds. Psychologists do a lot of testing, and so you almost need someone that can do almost a regression or hypnotherapy kind of thing to even start to tackle this kind of issue.
Right. Yeah, and that's where Julian and I had actually met, was when we were doing our very basic hypnotherapy training, and so I got to do a regression, actually 3 on him. So we actually had some past lives together, which was very rare. The professor, in fact, said, "No, that couldn't happen." Well, it did. It did. It was pretty fun. So we won't go into all that, but nonetheless, yeah, it was a rare situation, apparently. So, okay. So then how's this lady doing now?
Yep. So, once the energy body came back, she started feeling her legs again. Mm-hmm. But, they still had to do some work to really suture, in a much stronger way, the energy and the physical body. So they used some kind of crystals. Mm-hmm. That they basically showed me their toolbox, and they had tons of crystals, different shape, different colors for the different usage. And they took that and they put that into her body, and to a point where she got really painful for her. So I told them, can you do something? And then she was cold as crazy on the legs, and she didn't feel anything anymore. And they kept working. It seems to me like they were putting crystals around the nerve or the major blood vessels, I think, to allow for the energy to go through the legs again. And I think after the following day, she was able to feel her legs much better, and she was able to fold her knees. The one, it took like a second session, but the other one went pretty well within a few days. So, which is, I think, amazing. It is just the type of thing, you know.
So these guides that are kind of quasi-surgeons or whatever you may want to call them, were they previous incarnations on Earth, or were they from some other stellar location?
So they are not from our dimension. I know it may sound crazy, and I'm an engineer, so believe me, for me, they are not from here. And they said that they come from higher dimensions, star systems, and they won't do it for any physical issue. They basically do it for the ascension that is happening right now. So they're helping our bodies transform, you know, because we're being bombarded from the planet Earth and the sun right now. So they are helping all of us who are ascending when there's a blockade or a disconnection between your aura and your physical body. And they have the ability to create in the higher dimension and bring this to the physical level, which is pretty amazing.
It is. And you know, just for the folks listening, in the psychic industry or intuitive profession, there is an ongoing belief that we are currently moving into an ascension system, which basically means the vibration of individuals and the earth itself is raising. And you're either going to adjust, or you will, you know, go ahead and exit this life at the appropriate time. But they also believe that, you know, third density people will not be able to incarnate any further on this planet. It'll be fourth or fifth, whatever this case may be. You'll hear different stories about that. I won't debate that issue, but I will say that for folks listening, that's the concept. So as Julien's speaking about that, that's really where he's coming from. And it's almost a given in the psychic world, if you will, that's ongoing, and they feel these vibrations very intensely. And I believe there's some science on this. And I don't know, Tommy, are you seeing any of that kind of thought process taking place in your practice?
Yeah, definitely with the people involved in this realm. And I think for the audience, the way they may pick it up is how many of them feel like life seems to be going a little faster these days.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's what most people are identifying as the shift.
Yeah. Time and a half. Yeah, I got you. Yeah, so that's out there. Okay, so then these folks, they tell you what star system they were from or anything by chance?
They don't necessarily want to be known, but if you go through Native American teachings, a lot of their teachings come from the Pleiadians beings. Yeah. So I suspect they're from there, you know, because that friend is Native American, and you know, I have a lot of connection with that culture as well.
Right.
And I think they are the ones that are operating in this and helping us ascend, because they have this ability. Not all star beings have the ability to really come down to our dimension and bring stuff from theirs to ours. So.
Right, absolutely. So the Pleiadians is potentially where they're from, and if they've told you not to say anything, then sounds like you probably
they want to stay. You know, they're working, and I think it's also part of humility of the way, you know, they do it, and they're available to anyone who wants to. And it's because I think we're changing energy over the past few months that, you know, I'm able to access those levels, and I think a lot of folks can. And they're available to help. So it's not just through me, but through others, you know. Sure. You may have that happen. I've already started reading some there's a French psychic who's pretty famous on the radio, and she had similar experiences where she did surgery on people, and she was basically following orders from beings. She didn't even know who they were.
Gotcha. Yeah, and just for folks, Pleiadians, you can look it up on your star charts, but keep in mind that's not a single place. It's a huge star system. So we don't know what planet per se on in that entire star system, or even their solar system. We don't know. But when people say Pleiadians, it's you know, it's like basically saying the Milky Way. You know, it's you know, it's a bunch of space. So I wouldn't get too wound up about all that, because I don't know that anybody actually knows the exact planet, or if it's even been charted by anybody in the space program. So, so can you, Why do you think that they came to you in this particular case? Did you ask for assistance during meditations or your work, or how'd that come to be?
Well, to be honest, they've been around me for quite a bit, but I didn't know who they were. I always felt foreign on this planet since I was a child. I always felt out of place, especially I couldn't understand people being mean to each other. So
you're a Pleiadian.
I don't know. I really don't know, but it's just been, for me, love was my energy. And so I was so shocked. I think as a kid, I was basically harassed at school. So I think I left my body for many years, and I basically was out of my body. Like, it was too painful to be on the planet. So I closed myself completely. And I think the path I've been on over the past few years has really been to simplify, to remove all those layers, all those, emotions, all those fears, and to really truly be myself. And basically, when you open your heart, you get to a higher vibratory level. And so they can be there. I think, being a biological engineer, I understand the physical body pretty well. So I guess, they may have sensed that, but they've just been around for the past, I would say, a few years ago. I sensed their presence, but they were very high, and it was hard for me to connect with them. And 6 months ago, I basically doing intuitive painting as well, and I started to paint some star systems. So I painted the Pleiades because I always loved that system. I painted the Lyra system, and I painted Sirius star, the double star of Sirius, which is also in the different cultures. For the Egyptians, for example, that might have been influenced by that star, based on the building. So I don't know. I think they're looking for people with an open heart, who don't have a big ego, who think that they are doing the stuff to go through, and maybe I have a connection with them, and that's why they can.
There's that universal law that says like attracts like. And I think that's what's at play here. And I think other people, connect with other sources because that's where they're at. That's where they vibrate. And, everything in the world is vibration. And we know that. And more and more is being discovered about that. So they said crystals. Has that impacted the way you're using crystals? And I mean, for the listeners, just keeping in mind, we use crystals in science all the time. And, even your watches have quartz crystals because we know it stores immense amount of data and so forth. And then there's lots of supposed uses for all different kinds of crystals, and it depends on what you're trying to do. Now, who made those up or figured those out, I can't say for sure, but it's kind of almost accepted that certain amount of these, get a red garnet, that's going to be one thing, and a rose, quartz is going to be something else. So I don't know, did they enlighten you on any of that kind of thing?
So that's it. Yeah, I think it's interesting. Well, they're not using crystals, they're also using my voice. So, it's basically intuitive singing came with them. Okay. Funny enough, I started taking singing classes again 6 months ago. So, some synchronicity there.
Yeah.
I think crystals are the basic of their medicine because, as you said, as a frequency, and I think, as we know, every human organ or every part of the body has a specific frequency, the heart being the biggest one, of course, but and I think they're I don't know what, because I don't explain, but I think that they're using that frequency, that crystals, to be able to act. So I think it's much stronger than putting a crystal on somebody's body, because they basically take a specific one, adjust it to the person's vibration so it integrates better. I think it's as if they're putting some kind of prosthetic, but instead of being, a prosthetic, it's a crystal that is into the person's body. So I think it's much stronger than anything. They look more like rectangular shape, so more like quartz crystals to me, but I'm not sure. So it's fairly light, so I would say transparent or white, but they showed me there were many, many colors anyway. So I think based on where they have to work, if it's the aura or deeper in the body, they may change. They really have this ability to change and to densify stuff.
Right. Tommy, do you have a question on that? I mean, this.
No, it's interesting to hear you talk about how the sound was presented to you and how you're going down that road, because we've been pursuing that for a while. There's actually methods. You could take like your medication and imprint it to a sound frequency and listen to through headphones, so to speak, rather than ingesting something and getting, you know, decent results. So, I mean, I know there's a lot of ongoing research right now going forward as sound as the method of treatment for a lot of different issues. I can take you back though. You mentioned when you were younger, you kind of popped out of your body for a while. You know, for those listening, what did that appeal like? Because I know a lot of clinicians will see that and they won't know what the heck to do with that in the psychological world. So what was your experience?
I would basically be absent for quite a lot of moments, you know, but basically like be here, sitting here and not be in my body. So my body would feel really heavy. I would have a lot of tensions, obviously, because if your energy is going away, you know, then your body is not fed. So tensions start building up. And, you know, it's disconnected from my body mainly. So basically I would eat kind of crap to feel denser. So, you know, I had that habit to eat a lot to really come back down. And yeah, I would be very different to other kids. You know, I didn't have my teenage crisis. I would run away from those groups. You know, you just feel disconnected and very isolated, you know, from others. And like I was on my Robinson Island for 20 or more years, for example.
Yeah. Well, you know, in traumas, or especially early childhood traumas, it's believed that a lot of people do learn to come out of their body in order to protect themselves. And I know Tommy uses that in his treatment. I've certainly run across that with mine. And, you know, I think we need to recognize that, and there is the, you know, what they call, well, early childhood PTSD. They're getting a handle on that and how it impacts the rest of your life. So, you know, kids making fun of you, that's a traumatic thing. And if you're not getting that taken care of or adjusted properly, you know, where do you go? You go where you're safe. And if that's outside your body, that's where a lot of psychic kids, you know, go, and they're connecting to other places that's safer for them. In theory, they've only been out of the other side for a few years. It's not like some of us that are in our 40s or 50s or whatever the case may be. And we've been out for a while. We kind of forgot a lot of that. So, and I think that's correct, Tom, isn't it with the childhood PTSDs?
There's a lot of stuff with the child. You'll see them in school and the teacher will be complaining because they're staring out the window, not paying attention to the class whatsoever. Right. They've checked out, so to speak. And, you know, they'll label that a mental health disorder versus digging a little further to see what else it could be.
Right. You know, and psychology has its moments, but I honestly believe the biggest part that was left out of psychology is the soul and, you know, the actual spirit. I mean, working with just the brain, the body, as the case may be, that's great, but the soul really rules the roost. And if you don't correct those issues, in other words, spirit issues, I think that the rest is going to be challenging at best to get rooted out and make it work. I mean, that's my take on it. But again,
this is where Jung was going, Terry. And so, you know, strangely enough, I'm working with a psychologist, you know, because she understands her limitations. And so when it goes to the soul business, she sends the client. So we work together. But crazy enough, in France, Jung is not taught to psychologists or psychiatrists because he was the guy talking about the soul, you know, and no, it's not scientific enough. So he's removed from the programs, which is a bit crazy for all what he's brought to psychology, specifically on the soul level.
Right. And for those that listen to, he's referring to Carl, we call him Jung here, but it's spelled J-U-N-G. So Jung, yeah, it depends on where you're at, how you pronounce that. But, you know, another, you know, they had the Sigmund Freud, then the Carl Jung and so forth. And one of the key things that's taught to psychologists, and if they're omitting that, then they're omitting a big area, and that's sad. So, But okay, so what would you call yourself if somebody, you know, wanted to get in touch with you? Would you be a shaman? Would you be what would you label yourself?
I think for the US, it would be psychic healer. Although, you know, I'm not healing, but I think it's the closest term I can find.
Okay.
In France, I chose not to have a title, you know, because I'm using some shamanic stuff, I'm using some energy stuff, I'm using some psychic stuff, and you know, I'm thinking out of the box. But yeah, psychic healer would be a good description in the US.
Okay, fantastic. So the rest of this, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, are you available for remote stuff? If somebody, you know, back in Minnesota wants to get a hold of you, is that something they can do? Is there a website or contact, or how would you want to be contacted? Or maybe you don't want to be contacted at all. I don't know, but and go from there.
So I'm doing, most of my work is remote. So, you know, the energy travels, so there's no reason why not. So I have a website for the moment in French, but, you know, switching into English, I can definitely be contacted via email. You know, I can share with you guys. You know, having friends and clients all over the world now, you know, it's easy, especially with Zoom, to connect with others.
Right. Absolutely. Do you notice any difference between doing it physically with somebody versus remotely? I mean, as a practitioner?
I think it depends. I'm also doing group practices, so not only individual, but group. Interestingly enough, for groups, it's more efficient, especially when we work on, you know, I work on the healing the feminine, for example, and people can just close the camera and the mic and cry alone at home. And most people told me they felt better, you know, remotely than present, because they might have been judged by outside, like, oh, that person is crying, what's going on, you know? So it depends. I think some people hate remote, some people like it. So, but I think it works the same.
Yeah.
It's not better.
Yeah. You know, I actually like the phone even more than Zoom because I can tune my mind into someone rather than have to look at them and go from there. So other people like the Zoom, and that's perfectly fine. I can do it either way, but yeah, it's real challenging in these times. Of course, that's one thing COVID did for all of us worldwide. I mean, it basically pushed us into remote, you know, learning, remote issues, work, and so forth. So kind of an interesting field there. But now, Tom, you got a question on this?
Yeah, actually, I do. Coming from your traditional training, medical training, allopathic world, how did you make the jump over to the energy side, and how did you balance that? Because we have some listeners that probably in the same shoes as you, going, do I even want to make this jump? Am I losing my mind, kind of thing, or where am I at? How did you make that happen?
Well, so it started in 2010. Very quickly, I wanted to switch world, but I realized I had to learn. You know, you have to be patient. So my recommendation would be wait. You know, if it starts first, you know, there's a lot that we need to master before being able to help somebody in front of us. So I knew my job wasn't my passion after that showed up, but I was patient enough, and I traveled the world. As Terry said, it happened, I was in Belgium, then I moved to China, so I went to all the Asian traditions. I was presented with, you know, Zen meditation back in the US when I moved to Minnesota. So I had a lot of time. It took me like about 9 years. And in 2019, really it became clear, like I would open my laptop in the morning. I had no envy to work whatsoever. It would cost me a lot of energy to do something. And I felt I had to let that job go after all this preparation I had done, you know, but it took time. And then one day I was still hesitating. You know, Tom, it's not an easy thing to do, to leave a scientific job and do that. But one day I had basically 2 guys showed up, say, we want to talk to you today. Like, okay, well, I have to work. So I worked, and I said, come back. You know, you can do that. You can tell them, come back when my job is done. And they came back, and I kind of traveled somewhere with them. So like you say, you know, I just had an out-of-body experience. And I saw a being that was so full of love that it was a shock. And that being told me, well, we're waiting. So, it's up to you, because we have free will,
Right.
And I came back and I was like, wow, that's what you call a calling. So I was like, well, so 2 weeks after I negotiated my, resignation, and I was gone by the end of May 2019.
Wow.
So, but it was the right timing. I wouldn't rush it. I would take the time to work on yourself, because working on others is a tough job as well, but you can do it.
Yeah. So you were recently, well, let me back up and say this. Can you call these guys at any given time, or do you have to wait for them to arrive? I mean, if you wanted to talk to them right now, as an example, is that something you'd be able to connect to? And, I mean, like we think of psychics as giving messages to people, so any messages for Tommy or I sitting there while we're talking to you, any guide standing right behind you wanting to give a little extra advice out there?
They're always there, and they're inspiring me when I talk about it. It happens not quite often that I channel through my client sessions or my group sessions.
Right.
I don't think that, because they want to stay remote, so I don't think they want me to channel live today.
Right.
But what they like is
Yes.
that we talk about them, that, we all understand that we are divine beings in a human body, and that, to fix our body, it requires both. So that's why Western medicine is very important. We need it.
Yes.
But it can be really helped by, spiritual counseling or something, because some issues really are from the soul level and not the body. And so if you solve the body and not the soul, it will remain. So I think they really want humans to understand that we have the power to change our lives, and we have the power to be healthy. I think especially in the context right now around the world where people are scared, and this is what they want. They want people to open up as well, that humans are not the only ones in the universe. So I think it's not necessarily easy to accept for most of people. And even me a few years back, I would have said, you're nuts. But when you sense it and you go through it, it's real. So, we have to accept that.
I get you. You recently told me you went to, was it St. Mary's by the Sea, supposedly the location where Lazarus and Mary Magdalene landed after the crucifixion. And you said you were kind of motivated to go there. Do you want to tell me how that motivation came, and what did you find out when you got there?
Mm-hmm. So I don't know why, but most of my practice work is with women who had been either unable to carry a child, or have issues with the procreation assisted by medicine, or who had abused, or even worse. And so the energy of Mary Magdalene is pretty familiar to me since I started working on that. And I got that very strong calling. Again, it's a calling, like it was 2 or 3 weeks before. I basically had a dream, and I saw her by the sea and walking in the sea. Says, I want you by that date there. So I woke up, I'm like, okay, good, I'm self-employed, I have a flexible time schedule. And what's interesting is that day was the supermoon of June, so June 24th. Okay. And more important, the axis was Capricorn, and I don't know what the July sign is. We call it Cancer in France, but I don't remember. But anyway, and it's my birth moon, north-south. So it was interesting, and I had very strong experiences with, my emotions, my feminine. So it's a calling, and that's how it works. When you're a psychic, you're called, you go.
So you went, and would you find anything, or was just needed your presence there, or what happened?
I think, I had just 2 days just walking around, because those places have a strong energy, so you have to take some time to adjust to it. So it took me some time to really deep dive into the energy of the area. And once I did that, I felt I would say downloaded some wisdom, and I'm still digesting it. Literally, like my my belly has been a mess since I've been there. But the feminine being the belly, wherever you have to, clean all the emotions you haven't digested, and feeling more inspired to help these women as well, because I think the divine masculine cannot heal itself without partnering with the feminine. So I think that's why she wanted me to go there, and she told me you need to go and work with men as well, so they open up to their sensibility and sensitivity, so that they can heal the masculine.
That's been around for several years now. The need to balance the masculine energy with the feminine energy on the planet, that needs to happen, and I don't think people fully cognate what that is, but it is true. As we go through these energy shifts and so forth, that's a big part of it. It needs to happen in every way, because a lot of my clients are females, and they've had trauma and traumatized from a lot of misperceptions of things that people have told them from a youthful age, and they've perceived that this is how they're supposed to act, how they're supposed to be, and that's not necessarily true. They just were told by what I always call your demigods. It's your mom, dad, aunts, uncles, preachers, and teachers, and so there you go. So Tom, you got a question here. We're going to start to wrap this thing up. So
yeah, no, I think I got the same. Most of my clients are either public safety or veterans, so that's historically a male-dominated field.
Right.
But the need for them to get in touch with the more feminine side and be able to emote their experiences instead of having to suck it up and move on kind of thing.
Right.
And so seeing a big shift of acceptance within those cultures that when we started, 30 plus years ago in that field, that was not an option.
Right. Clearly not. So very good. Well, Julian, you have any wrap up thoughts before we close this podcast down for the day?
No, I just wanted to thank you both for inviting me to talk about this. I think they're happy up there that, the information is out, that, there's help available, that we are very, very complex and interesting beings in the universe. And I think I just want to make clear that everything we do here goes through the physical body.
Right.
So, you cannot raise your spirituality if you don't deep dive inside your physical body, if you don't handle your emotions, if you don't do sports, if you don't eat well. I think that's what they want to say, because many people want to go to the stars first, but you need to have good roots in here. I think that's how I would close it, Terry and Tom.
Okay, fantastic. And I will just say, I have been around Julien a lot, and what he's saying is true. I have seen entities around him, so he's not just blowing smoke up your skirts, folks. He really does have these folks around him. I've seen them myself and interacted, and it was interesting. I think I'll just tell the one brief story when he went into a past life regression. The place I first saw him, matter of fact, I don't even know if it was an regression. Maybe it was just something I picked up first, but I told him if he remembered this, but we were on the plains of Gaul, and of course, Gaul's the ancient name for France, and he was on a horse, and I was on a horse as well, overlooking a previous battlefield, and he had a human heart stuck on the tip of his spear. And I do remember that it was very interesting. And then as we progressed through several more lives, it became self-evident that was an issue. And then you were creating biomechanical parts, artificial parts for hearts. And so when people think of karma and balancing and dharma, you were doing exactly, a lot of heart stuff that was damaged during some lives, and now you're fixing that, which is, I think, absolutely fantastic, and just showed that exact framework of how karma / dharma actually works. So that's very cool. Yeah.
Indeed.
So, well, hey, folks, it's been fun. I've enjoyed the opportunity to get caught up with Julien here on the podcast, and I hope you guys have as well. For our friends in Europe that may be watching, hey, welcome aboard. And I'm sure Julien will be happy to work with you, and probably folks in the States, although the time difference is about 6, 7, 8 hours. So you may be at midnight in your jammies by the time you get talked to him at breakfast. So, but we can make that all work, I'm sure. And And for everybody here at the podcast, we appreciate your time and effort. And we'll be back again for another episode and another exciting guest. So thank you very much.
Thank you again, Julian.